Welcome to the 1000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 658th night, she pursued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Marash and Gharib took seat on Barkan's thrones and held high state. Then said Gharib to Marash, What thinkest thou to do? And Marash replied, O king of mankind, I have dispatched 100 horse to learn where Barkan is, that we may pursue him. Then they abode 3 days in the palace till the scouting Murads returned with the news that Barkan had fled to the mountain Kaf and craved protection of the Blue King who granted it. Whereupon quoth Marash to Gharib, What sayest thou, O my brother? And quoth Gharib, Except we attack them, they will attack us. So they bade the host make ready for departure, and after 3 days they were about to set out with their troops, when the Murads, who had carried Sahim and presents back to Oman, returned and kissed ground before Gharib. He questioned them of his people, and they replied, After the last affair, thy brother Ajib, leaving Yarab bin Qatan, fled to the king of Hind, and submitting his case, sought his protection. The king granted his prayer, and writing letters to all his governors, levied an army as it were the surging sea, having neither beginning nor end, wherewith he proposed to invade all Iraq and lay it waste. When Gharib heard this, he said, Perish the misbelievers! Verily Allah Almighty shall give the victory to all Islam, and I will soon show them hew and foin. Said Marash, O king of inhumans, by the virtue of the mighty name, I must needs go with thee to thy kingdom, and destroy thy foes, and bring thee to thy wish. Gharib thanked him, and they rested on this resolve till the morrow, when they set out, intending for Mount Caucasus, and marched many days till they reached the city of Alabaster and the Pied Palace. Now this city was fashioned of alabaster and precious stones by Barik bin Faki, father of the jinn, and he was also founded the Pied Palace, which was so named because it edified with 1 brick of gold alternating with 1 of silver, nor was there built at aught like it in all the world. When they came within a half a day's journey of the city, they halted to take rest, and Marash sent out the reconnaissance scout, who returned and said, O king, within the city of Alabaster are legions of jinns, for numbers as the leaves of the trees or as drops of rain. So Marash said to Gharib, How shall we do, O king of mankind? He replied, O king, divide your men into 4 bodies, and encompass with them the camp of the infidels. Then, in the middle of the night, let them cry out, saying, God is most great, and withdraw and watch what happeneth among the tribes of the jinn. So Marash did as Gharib counseled, and the troops waited till midnight, when they circled the foe, and shouted, Aloha Akbar! Ho for the faith of Abraham the friend, on whom be peace! The misbelievers at this cry awoke in a fright, and snatching up their arms, fell one upon the other till the morning, when most of them were dead bodies, but few remained. Then Gharib cried out to the true believers, saying, Up, and at the remnant of the Kafirs, Behold, I am with you, and Allah is your helper. So the Moslems drave at the enemy, and Gharib bared his magical blade, al-Mahik, and fell upon the foe, lopping off noses and making heads wax hoary, and whole ranks turn tail. At last he came up with Barkan, and smote him, and bereft him of life, and he fell down drenched in his own blood. Unlikewise he did with the Blue King, and by under an hour not one of the Kafirs was left alive to tell the tale. Then Gharib and Marash entered the Pied Palace, and found its walls builded of alternating courses of gold and silver, with door sills of crystals and keystones of greenest emeralds. In its midst was a fountain adorned with bells and pendants, and figures of birds and beasts spouting forth water, and thereby at dats, furnished with gold brocade silk, embroidered with jewels, and they found the treasures of the palace past count of description. Then they entered the women's court, where they came upon a magnificent seraglio, and Gharib saw among the Blue King's women folk a girl, clad in a dress worth 1,000 dinars. Never had he beheld a goodlier. Among her were 100 slave girls, upholding her train with golden hooks, and she was in their midst as the moon among stars. When he saw her, his reason was confounded, and he said to one of the waiting women, "Who may that yonder maid be?" Quoth they, "This is the Blue King's daughter, Star o' Morn." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 659th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Gharib asked the slave woman, saying, 'Who may be yonder maid?' they replied, 'This is Star o' Morn, daughter of the Blue King.' Then Gharib turned to Marash and said to him, 'O king of the Jinn, have a mind to take yonder damsel to wife.' Replied Marash, 'The palace and all that therein, livestock and dead, are the prize of thy right hand. For hast thou not devised a stratagem to destroy the Blue King and Barkan? They had cut us off to the last one. Wherefore the treasure is thy treasure, and the folk thy thralls.' Gharib thanked him for his fair speech, and going up to the girl, gazed steadfastly upon her, and loved her with exceeding love, forgetting Fakir Taj, the princess, and even Madia. And now her mother was the Chinese king's daughter, whom the Blue King had carried off from her palace and perforce deflowered, and she conceived by him, and bare this daughter, who he called Star o' Morn, by reason of her beauty and loveliness, for she was the very princess of the fair. Her mother died when she was a babe of 40 days, and the nurses and eunuchs reared her till she reached the age of 17. But she hated her sire, and rejoiced in his slaughter. So Gharib put his palm to hers, and went in unto her that night, and found her a virgin. Then he bade pull down the pied palace, and divide the spoil with the true believing Jinn, and there fell to his share 21,000 bricks of gold and silver and money, and treasure beyond speech and count. Then Marash took Gharib, and showed him the mountain calf, and all its marvels. After which they returned to Barkan's fortress, and dismantled it, and shared the spoils thereof. Then they repaired to Marash's capital, where they tarried 5 days, when Gharib sought to revisit his native country. And Marash said, "O king of mankind, I will ride at thy stirrup, and bring thee to thine own land." Replied Gharib, "No, by the virtue of Abraham the friend, I will not suffer thee to weary thyself thus, nor will I take any of the jinns save Kaylajan and Kurajan." Quoth the king, "Take with thee 10,000 horsemen of the jinn to serve thee." But quoth Gharib, "I will take only as I said to thee." So Marash bade 1,000 Marids carry him to his native land, and when his share of the spoil, and he commanded Kaylajan and Kurajan to follow him and obey him, and they answered, "Hearkening and obedience." Then said Gharib to the Marids, "Do you carry the treasure and Star o' Morn?" For he himself thought to ride his flying steed. But Marash said to him, "This horse, O my brother, will live only in our region, and if it come upon man's earth, 'twill die. But I have in my stables a sea-horse, whose fellow is not found in all Iraq. No, not in all the world in its like." So he caused bring forth the horse, and when Gharib saw it, it interposed between him and his wits. Then they bound it, and Kaylajan bore it on his shoulders, and Kurajan took what he could carry. And Marash embraced Gharib, and wept for parting from him, saying, "O my brother, it'll befall thee wherein thou art powerless. Send for me, and I will come to thine aid with an army able to lay waste the whole earth and what is thereon." Gharib thanked him for his kindness and zeal for the true faith, and took leave of him. Whereupon the Marids set out with Gharib and his goods, and after traversing 50 years' journey in 2 days and a night, alighted near the city of Oman, and halted to take rest. Then Gharib sent out Kaylajan to learn news of his people, and he returned and said, "O king, the city is beleaguered by a host of infidels, as they were the surging sea, and thy people are fighting them. The drums beat to battle, and Jarmakan goeth forth as champion in the field." When Gharib heard this, he cried aloud, "God is most great," and said to Kaylajan, "Saddle me the steed, and bring me my arms and spear, for today the valiant shall be known from the coward in the place of war and battlestead." So Kaylajan brought him all he sought. And Gharib, armed and belting in baldric, al-Mahik, mounted the seahorse and made toward the host. Quoth Kaylajan and Kurajan to him, Set thy heart at rest, and let us go to the Kafirs and scatter them abroad in the wastes and wilds, till by the help of Allah the all-powerful we leave not a soul alive, no, not a blower of the fire. But Gharib said, By the virtue of Abraham the friend, I will not let you fight them without me, and behold, I mount. Now, the cause of the coming of that great host was right marvelous. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 660th night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Gharib had bidden Kaylajan go and learn news of his people, the jinn fared forth, and presently returning said, Verily, around thy city is a mighty host. Now, the cause of its coming was that Ajib, having fled the field after Gharib's army had been put to the rout, said to his people, O folk, if we return to Gharib bin Katan, he will say to us, But for you, my son, and my people had not been slain, and he will put us to death, even the last man. Wherefore, methinks, we would be better off to go to Tarkanan, king of Hind, and beseech him to avenge us. Replied they, Come, let us go hither, and the blessings of the fire be upon thee. So they fared days and nights, till they reached King Tarkan's capital city, and after asking and obtaining permission to present himself, Ajib went in to him and kissed the ground before him. Then he wished him what men used to wish a monarchy, and said to him, O king, protect me, so may protect thee the sparkling fire and the night with its thick darkness. Tarkan looked at Ajib and asked, Who art thou, and what dost thou want? To which the other answered, I am Ajib, king of all Iraq. My brother hath wronged me, and gotten the mastery of the land, and the subjects have submitted themselves to him. Moreover, he hath embraced the faith of all Islam, and he ceaseth not to chase me from country to country. And behold, I am come to seek protection of thee and thy power. When Tarkan heard Ajib's words, he rose and sat down and cried, By the virtue of the fire I will assuredly avenge thee, and will let none other serve other than my goddess the fire. And he called aloud to his son, saying, O my son, make ready to go to all Iraq, and lay it waste, and bind all who serve aught but the fire, and torment them, and make examples of them, yet slay them not, but bring them to me, that I may ply them with various tortures, and make them taste the bitterness of humiliation, and leave them a warning to whoso will be warned in this our while. Then he chose out to accompany him 80,000 fighting men on horseback, like the number of giraffes, besides 10,000 elephants, bearing on their back seats of sandalwood, latticed with golden rods, plated and studded with gold and silver, and shielded with pavois of gold and emeralds. Moreover, he sent good store of war chariots, in each 8 men fighting with all kinds of weapons. Now, the prince's name was Raj Shah, and he was the champion of his time for prowess, having no peer. So he and his army equipped them in 10 days' time, then set out as they were a bank of clouds, and fared on 2 months' journey, till they came upon Oman city, and encompassed it, to the joy of Ajib, who thought himself assured of victory. Jarb Khan and Sadan and all their fighting men sallied forth into the field of fight, whilst the kettle drums battled to beat and the horses neighed. At this moment up came King Gharib, who, as we have said, had been warned by Kaylajan, and he urged on his destroyer, and entered among the infidels, waiting to see who should come forth and open the chapter of war. Then out rushed Sadan and Ghul, and offered combat, whereupon there issued forth to him one of the champions of Hind. But Sadan scarce let him take stand in front ere he smote him with his mace, and crushed his bones, and stretched him on the ground, and so did he with the second and the third, till he had slain 30 fighting men. Then there dashed out of them an Indian cavalier by the name of Padash al-Akan, uncle to King Tarkan. And on this day the doughtiest man, reckoned worth 5,000 horse in battle plain, and cried out to Sidon, saying, O thief of the Arabs, hath thou daring reached that degree that thou shouldest slay the king of Hind, and their champions, and capture their horsemen? But this day is the last of thy worldly days. When Sidon heard these words, his eyes waxed blood red, and he drave at Pitash, and aimed a stroke at him with his club, but he evaded it, and the force of the blow bore Sidon to the ground. And before he could recover himself, the Indians pinioned him and hauled them off to their tents. Now when Jarmkhan saw his comrade a prisoner, he cried out, saying, Ho, for the faith of Abraham the friend! And clapping heel to his horse, ran at Pitash. They wheeled around a while, till Pitash charged Jarmkhan, and catching him by his jerkin, tear him from his saddle, and cast him to the ground. Whereupon the Indians bound him, and dragged him away to their tents. And Pitash ceased not to overcome all who came out to him, captain after captain, till he had made prisoners of 24 chiefs of the Moslems, whereat the true believers were sore dismayed. When Gharib saw what had befallen his braves, he drew from beneath his knee a mace of gold, weighing 60 pounds, which had belonged to Barkan, king of the Jann. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 661st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Gharib beheld what had befallen his braves, he drew forth a golden mace, which had belonged to Barkan, king of the Jann, and clapped heel to his sea-horse, which bore him like wind gusts into the main field. Then he let drive at Pitash, crying out, God is most great. He giveth aid and victory, and he abaseth whoso reject the faith of Abraham and the friend. And smote him with a mace, whereupon he fell to the ground. And Gharib, turning to the Moslems, saw his brother Sahim, and said to him, Pinion me this hound. When Sahim heard his brother's words, he ran to Pitash, and bound him hard and fast, and bore him off, whilst the Moslem braves wondered who this knight could be. And the Indians said to one another, Who is this horseman, which came out from among them, and hath taken our chief prisoner? Meanwhile, Gharib continued to offer battle, and there issued forth to him a captain of the Hindus, who he fell to the earth with his mace, and Kaijan and Quran pinioned him and delivered him over to Sahim. Nor did Gharib leave to do thus till he had taken prisoner 52 of the doughtiest captains of the army of the Hind. Then the day came to an end, and the kettle drums beat the retreat. Whereupon Gharib left the field and rode towards the Moslem camp. The first to meet him was Sahim, who kissed his feet in the stirrups and said, May thy hand never wither, O champion of the age. Tell us who thou art among the braves. So Gharib raised his visor of mail, and Sahim knew him and cried out, says, This is your king and your lord Gharib, who has come back from the land of the Jann. When the Moslems heard Gharib's name, they threw themselves off their horsebacks and crowded about him and kissed his feet in the stirrups and saluted him, rejoicing in his safe return. Then they carried him into the city of Oman, when he entered his palace and sat down on the throne of his kingship, whilst his officers stood round about him with utmost joy. Food was set on, and they ate, after which Gharib related to them all that had betided him with the jinn in Mount Kaf, and they marveled thereat with exceeding marvel, and praised Allah for his safety. Then he dismissed them to their sleeping places, so they withdrew to their several lodgings, and when none abode with them but Kailashan and Kurshan, who never left him, he said to them, Can you carry me to Kufa, that I may take my pleasure in my harem, and bring me back before the end of the night? They replied, O our Lord, that thou askest is easy. Now the distance between Kufa and Oman is 60 days' journey for a diligent horseman, and Kailashan and Kurshan, I will carry him going and thou coming back. So he took up Gharib and flew off with him in company with Kurshan. Nor was an hour passed before they set him down at the gate of his palace in Kufa. He went in to his uncle Al-Dama, who rose to him and saluted him. After which quoth Gharib, How is it with my wives, Fakih and Madia? Al-Dama answered, They are both well and in good case. Then the eunuch went in and acquainted the women of the harem with Gharib's coming, whereat they rejoiced and raised the trill of joy and gave him the reward for good news. Presently in came King Gharib, and they rose and saluting him conversed with him till Al-Dama entered, when Gharib related to them all that had befallen him in the land of the Jinn, whereat they all marvelled. Then he lay with Fakih till near daybreak, when he took leave of his wives and his uncle, and mounted Kurajan's back. Nor was the darkness dispelled before 2 Marids set him down in the city of Oman. Then he and his men armed, and he bade open the gates, when behold, up came a horseman from the host of the Indians with Jarmkhan and Sadan, and the rest of the captive captains, whom he had delivered, and committed them to Gharib. The Moslems, rejoicing in their safety, donned their mails and took horse, while the kettle drums beat a point of war, and the miscreants also drew up in line. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 662nd night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the Moslem host mounted and rode to the plain of cut and thrust, the first to open the door of the war was King Gharib, who, drawing his sword al-Mahik, drove his charger between the 2 ranks, and cried out, saying, Whoso knoweth me hath enough of my mischief, and whoso unknoweth me, to him I will make myself known. I am Gharib, king of all Iraq and all Yaman, brother of Ajib. When Rod Shah, son of the king of Hind, heard this, he shouted to his captains, Bring me Ajib. So they brought him in. And Rod Shah said to him, Thou wottest that this quarrel is thy quarrel, and thou art the cause of all this slaughter. Now yonder standeth thy brother Gharib, middlemost the fight field, and stead where sword and spear we shall wield. Go thou to him, and bring him to me a prisoner, that I may set him on a camel, arcy-versy, and make a show of him, and carry him to the land of Hind. Answered Ajib, O king, send out to him another than I, for I am ill health this morning. But Rod Shah snarked and snorted and cried, By the virtue of the sparkling fire and the light and the shade and the heat, unless thou fare forth to thy brother and bring to me him in haste, I will cut off thy head and make an end of thee. So Ajib took heart, and urging his horse up to his brother in the middle field, said to him, O dog of the Arabs, and vilest of all who hammer down tent pegs, wilt thou content with kings? Take what to thy cometh, and receive the glad tidings of thy death. When Gharib heard this, he said to him, Who art thou among the kings? And Ajib answered, saying, I am thy brother, and this day is the last of thy worldly days. Now when Gharib was assured that he was indeed his brother Ajib, he cried out and said, Ho, to avenge my father and mother. Then giving his sword to Kurajan, he drave at Ajib, and smote him with his mace a smashing blow, and a swashing that went nigh to beat in his ribs, and seizing him by the male gorget, tore him from the saddle, and cast him to the ground. Whereupon the 2 Marids pounced upon him, and binding him fast, dragged him off, all dejected and abject, while Gharib rejoiced in the capture of his enemy, and repeated these couplets of the poet. I have won my wish, and my need have scored. Unto thee be the praise and the thanks, O our Lord. I grew up dejected and abject poor, but Allah vouchsafed me all boons implored. I have conquered countries and mastered men, but for thee were I not, O thou Lord adored. When Rod Shah saw how evilly Ajib fared with his brother, he called for his charger, and donning his harness and habergeon, mounted and dashed out at field. As soon as he drew near King Gharib, he cried out to him, saying, O basest of Arabs, and bearer of scrubs, who art thou that thou shouldest capture kings and braves? Down from thy horse, and put elbows behind back, and kiss my feet, and set my warriors free, and go with me in bond of chains to my reign, that I may pardon thee, and make thee a sheik in our own land. So mayest thou eat there a bittock of bread. When Gharib heard these words, he laughed till he fell backwards, and answering him said, O mad hound and mangy wolf, soon shalt thou see against who the shifts of fortune will turn. Then he cried out to Sahim, saying, Bring me the prisoners. So he brought them, and Gharib smote off their heads, whereupon Raj Shah drave at him with the driving of a lordly champion, and the onslaught of a fierce slaughter, and they falsed and fainted and fought till nightfall, when the kettle drums beat and retreat. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease my telling of this tale, till it be morrow.